Hi everyone, Ed Robertson, hoping you're enjoying the holiday weekend. We are taking a few days off ourselves and we'll be back with a brand new edition of TV Confidential next week. In the meantime, we thought we'd bring you what we'll call a blast from the past, an excerpt from one of our conversations that you may have heard before, but probably haven't heard in a long time. We hope you'll enjoy.
Hi, this is Marla Gibbs, also known as Florence on the Jeffersons, Mary on 227, and you're listening to TV Confidential.
No, sir. I'm not a deserter.
Well, I didn't think you was. I was just trying to figure out...
I'm a draft dodger.
What did he say?
He said he was a draft dodger.
Ed Robertson along with Tony Figueroa, Donna Allen, and our guest, Jay Moriarty. Jay spent 7 years as a staff writer, producer, and later showrunner of The Jeffersons, while his memoir, Honky in the House, takes you behind the scenes of The Jeffersons, while also providing a capsule history of the so-called golden age of TV sitcoms, as well as insight into why Norman Lear is one of the smartest, shrewdest, and most courageous producers television will ever know. Honky in the House, available online right now, Amazon.com. Jay Moriarty is also the co-writer, along with his longtime writing partner Mike Milligan, of The Draft Dodger. The Draft Dodger, the famous episode of All in the Family that aired on Christmas night, 1976, and an episode to which Norman Lear made a very important contribution. Tony?
This was happening at a time where, because we had many Christmases with the Bunkers by the time this one, so we had one where Archie didn't get his bonus, and so before everything hit the fan, it was a pretty good Christmas for the Bunkers. It was better than some of the Christmases that they had in the past. And then until, the turkey comes onto the table and everything's revealed. So it was nice to see, that things were going good for Mike with a job, and they had the baby and everything, but you could still see that these are still the people that we have, spent, I guess at this point, 6 years with. 5 years with. So we knew these people. We have spent Saturday nights or Sunday nights with these people for several years. So to have this experience and to have a conversation that I'm sure a lot of Americans were having that same conversation at their table.
Yeah, people have asked me, like when they know that I wrote a treatment a long time, you wish they had done it then, and I don't know. It seemed like a good story then, but it's interesting that it worked out, in 1976 to be maybe even a better story, because everybody was really deciding about this thing about, are these kids criminals or not, and it really seemed to have an impact to the point they're even doing 40 minutes later. Norman chooses that as their first episode to do All in the Family. I guess, I think I talked to Ed about the book, the All in the Family book that's out, where Norman and Jim Colucci, Norman, there it is.
You can't see this at home, folks, but I am holding that book up to the camera, that book being All in the Family, the show that changed television, which Jim Colucci co-wrote with Norman Lear.
Yeah, there's like almost 50 episodes. The initial idea was to do the 50 top ones, and I think they got 40-something. That it's such a big book already, but they pick out, it's a great book because it explains not only the Draft Dodger, but all the important, the issue-oriented homophobia, all the kind of things that they...
Yeah, the Draft Dodger is one of the 50 episodes of All in the Family, personally selected by Norman Lear himself for this new book called All in the Family, the show that changed television, by Norman Lear, as told to our friend Jim Colucci. The Draft Dodger is singled out as one of the 10 episodes of All in the Family that, to quote Norman Lear, shook things up. And Jay Moriarty wrote the Draft Dodger along with his longtime writing partner Mike Milligan. Jay is our guest this hour. Jay's memoir of his career in television is called Honky in the House, writing and producing The Jeffersons. Jay is holding his book up to the camera.
The only character in the Draft Dodger episode that was created for the episode is David Brewster.
Right.
And was there any plan to bring back the character of David after Carter was inaugurated?
Well, That's interesting, but not that I know of, but nothing against the actor, except it wasn't really a comedy role. Maybe if he were funnier or something, might have worked him in. But he everything was pretty serious when it got to David, and so the answer is no to that. But it was the thing with All in the Family and Norman was the fact that you could, and I never realized it before, that you could combine comedy and drama. You could do serious subjects and get laughs at the same time. You never saw that on any TV series before. If it was a comedy, it was I Dream of Jeannie or something, and it was always goofy stuff. The boss is coming over and the roast is burned, or whatever. It's
All in the Family was just so grounded.
It was
grounded in reality, and life is funny.
I remember Isabel Sanford telling me when she first saw All in the Family, where a friend of hers, she was at home. A friend of hers calls her and says, "Turn on channel 2 right now." And so Archie Bunker, and she's watching this thing, and he's saying all these off-color words that you hear people say, but not on television. And she didn't realize it wouldn't be long before she'd actually be on the show as Lionel's mother. But that's what when I went to the Jeffersons, when Mike and I were fortunate enough to on staff of the Jeffersons, I always tried to, like you said before, shook up. I always tried to follow Norman's thing of doing things episodes that would shake up. Like we finally on Jeffersons did a KKK episode, and we did a tribute to Norman. Mike and I ran the show, we always tried to keep the original stuff, Norman's idea of getting something really serious like the KKK. And that's something we wanted to do for a couple of years. I always figured, how can we get George Jefferson and the KKK? Something seemed good about that, but then how do you do it? What do you have to ride? Take a vacation down south or something. It
has to serve the story and serve the show and serve the character in order for it to work.
Right, and funny was the thing. If you look at the viewers' letters, most of them all say, "I laugh. I love I love that they're black and white characters and stuff, but it makes me laugh. It's funny when I'm in the hospital. I watch it. I always laugh." And the show ended up going 11 seasons, which was a record that time for any TV series. For a sitcom, it held up for a long time. And in fact, what's his name? Medea.
Tyler Perry.
Yeah, Tyler Perry. Thank you. He did one of House of Pain. They did one more episode than the Jeffersons, 253. So they could say they were the longest running black show, so-called black show on TV. But you always walk that thing, and I write about it in the book about Honky about keeping the comedy and it was funny because if you read it, Nibble, Ross, and West, I don't know if you know enough about TV to remember Don, Mickey, and Bernie. They worked with Norman Lear on all these Emmy-winning shows that they did in the beginning. By the time they got created by credit on the Jeffersons, they were exec producers of the Jeffersons. They're the guys that hired Mike and I, and they end up creating Three's Company. So that's like as far away from that French farce as you could get from what Norman was doing. We're always trying to do what Norman did, and they were always trying to push us in more of a farce direction. But I think it worked out okay because we kind of kept, there was the farce. Like Marla Gibbs, she'll say that her favorite episode was the one where she gets to pretend that she's Helen Willis, so she can play uppity and the actors loved the part. The actors were so good they could do anything. And Norman always worked with stage actors. He saw Sherman Hemsley and Pearlie, and he got Carol O'Connor and the Arthur and all his people. Bonnie Franklin were stage actors, and he was doing a play. Every episode of Norman's 8 shows were done in front of a live audience, and it was a play. We were actors that could do that. Those kind of shows, but yeah, it was it. I should tell you, the first Mike and I, when we started, this is all in the book. Actually, I won't give you the first set. The first time we met Don, Mickey, and Bernie, we made the mistake. We had a good meeting. Our agent said, "Yeah, they're going on hiatus." This was when they were doing All in the Family, and they'll probably get an assignment or two. Well, we said we want to work on staff. We want an assignment to, so we wrote a script ahead of time, got it to them. They didn't like it, and it was basically writing a Dear John letter. We were gone. It wasn't until 2 years later we ran in and we pitched. We finally got hired. We wrote an episode called Louise's Daughter. I don't remember that, where the girl shows up and says Louise is her mother. That was at a time, got a lot of ideas out of Time magazine then. Look at Time and you saw that kids who were adopted were able to trace their parents, which they couldn't have done before. But anyway, the story I want to tell you is, so we did rewrites about the first 4 scripts we wrote were like rewrites. That's what TV's all about, is like, they should call it the Rewriters Guild. This staff is rewriting everything. And then they said, Dominic and Bernie said, come up with originals. So Mike and I had seen in Ebony magazine that the highest suicide rate in the country is among black women. And I thought about Florence. Florence wasn't a regular character yet. She wasn't living in the house. She was just a maid. And so I pitched it to Dominic and Bernie, and suicide. And Don was like, no, what are you talking about? Suicide? You're daft, Can't make that funny. Forget it. There's no way we could do that. They said, come up with something else. So he came up with a couple other things we pitched, and there were 2 of them they kind of responded to, and they said, go pitch those to Norman. So we went up to pitch to Norman, Mike and I and Norman, and we pitched the other 2 ideas, and Norman was kind of cool on them and said, you got anything else? And so I said, well, I was reading Ebony magazine, and they were singing, Norman just loved that, just suicide rate among black women, and Norman, and we get a story about Florence, and Norman says, yeah, they help brings stories into the house, brings problems into the house, and Norman started off right away. So Florence is cleaning everything, and Louise is going, that's strange, and George is going, it's about time, and just kind of like that. So now Norman says, great, we got an episode about suicide for the Jeffersons. We got to go down and tell Dominic and Bertie, after they said, how'd it go? I said, well, and then we told Don. Don was like the alpha dog of the 3. And every one of them just stared like, that's the last thing they wanted to hear from these 2 guys. We were under a 6-week option. We didn't know we were going to be out of there soon or what. And Don said, just, 3 words, go write it, which was more of a dare than a directive, So we went to write this suicide thing. They didn't, for 2 weeks, nobody came near our office. Even Bernie, who was always stopping in and throwing a joke. But the upshot of that whole story is we wrote the script, and 2 weeks, we turned it in, didn't hear from him day one, didn't hear from him second day. Third day, Mike started cleaning out his desk and said we should start writing our suicide notes. And I went down, Don was in his office. I said, you get a chance to read our script? He said, yeah. I said, what do you think? He said, not bad. So that's about the best thing we'd heard Don say. A script out of script. Like a running back to Mike. He said, not bad. High five, because we ended up shooting it. It was a very touching show. Marla Gibbs wrote us a nice little thank you note, Kwanzaa note, and it was the first one she actually played the major role in. And anyway, it got done. But that was kind of the push. We were always trying to get a little more serious, like Bloom. I always kind of I was so influenced by All in the Family. I remember, I won't go into the stories about All in the Family that affected me. You guys probably had yours, but of all the shows I saw on All in the Family, and maybe Tony and Donna have the one where Archie and Meathead are trapped in the basement. God. And where they start talking, there's some brew there, and they're drinking a little, and they talk about everything from the first time they met to Archie's childhood, and you find out that he was abused by his father as a child. And in fact, his father called him Meathead when he was a kid. It was really digging in. You wouldn't see, Father Knows Best or Ozzy and Harriet or anything doing something like Archie and Meathead were talking about. Yeah. And we would try to go those directions, but we always had to keep it funny at the same time.
One more item. If you're starting a company, particularly one that is in an emerging market, you know that averting any sort of legal dispute is crucial to your business plan. Our friends at Tectonic Law offer an array of services that can help you avoid and preempt future litigation while also developing and protecting your intellectual property and intangible assets. Tectonic Law serves the needs of a host of emerging industries throughout California and beyond, including industrial designers, beverage makers, artists, farmers, retail stores, health practitioners, wellness experts, cosmetics manufacturers, nonprofit organizations, innovators in sustainable practices, and libraries. Go to tectoniclaw.com to learn more about how Tectonic Law can help your business thrive. tectoniclaw.com. Rock solid representation for groundbreaking industries.
This portion of TV Confidential is brought to us by our friends at Front Porch Realty, the community of realtors in the Northern Bay area of California that is committed to finding the solution that is best for their clients. Whether you're a first-time home buyer or looking to sell or lease your property in Northern California, call Karen Strain at 415-886-7411 or visit frontporchrealtygroup.com for more information on how they can help you.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for listening to the TV Confidential podcast. If you like what you hear, please consider subscribing to the TV Confidential podcast, or better yet, give us a review on Apple Podcasts, Podchaser, or wherever you listen to our podcast.